Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Grateful to be here with all of you today. And so today I'll discuss on the topic of science and spirituality. I'll start with specifically science and God, and then we will move towards science and spirituality. And I will talk about this from three distinct perspectives: historical, then philosophical, and then personal. Personal means, or you can say individual is, how can we as individual seekers, what does it mean for us? So when I talk about historical, I'll primarily talk more from the Western history, because Western history has affected the way we see modern science. And then when I talk about philosophical, I talk from a Vedic perspective more, and there we'll go a little into history, but we'll focus more on the concepts. So, when I was introduced to Bhakti about let's start with the historical before we get to the philosophical and the individual. Are all of you able to see this from here? Maybe you can move a little bit on the other side. So, when I was introduced to Bhakti, I was introduced about almost 30 years ago, 1996. And I came from a very rational background. I was born in a Brahmin family, and our parents were pious. We were not really very religious, but we were quite pious. And I had read the Bhagavad Gita, or I could say, I had memorized a few Bhagavad Gita verses to please my parents. But I never saw Bhagavad Gita as a book of wisdom. I saw the Bhagavad Gita more as a book of piety. And this is what we should memorize to be like a good person. And so when I was introduced to Krishna consciousness, what fascinated me was the rational and the scientific presentation of Krishna consciousness, or rather of the Bhagavad Gita wisdom specifically. And that's what has drawn me throughout. So I have a fairly rational approach to spirituality. I'll talk about that when I come to the individual aspect. But why am I talking about this is that we all approach Krishna or spirituality in general. If we consider, in one sense we might say that there are two views of looking at spirituality. Say like today morning I was in class, we say that Krishna is at the top of the mountain, and then we are climbing up the mountain. And then there are different religious traditions, different spiritual paths, which are like different paths up the mountain. This is one way of looking at spirituality. Now this is more like there are like fixed, finite paths. You cannot have infinite paths going up the mountain. Now the other understanding is that Krishna is like an ocean. And each individual approaches Krishna from a different part of the desert that is the material world. So we all have our individual experiences. We have our individual, we may all be Indians, but still we have our individual upbringings. We have our individual samskaras. We have our individual samskaral impressions and conceptions. And we have, when we all can say we have anarthas, we all have to deal with lust, anger, greed. But we all have our specific challenges. So in one sense, ultimately, Krishna is an individual, we are an individual. So it's like each one of us has an individual path to Krishna. So, because ultimately, each one of us will have an individual relationship with Krishna. So Krishna is like an ocean, and we approach that ocean from different directions. So somebody might approach, to just get some indication, somebody might approach from a very ritual perspective. I'm not using the word ritual in negative sense, but for them, doing this, they grew up with seeing their parents do some puja in the temple nearby, and that's what they love doing. Now somebody may approach from a very philosophical perspective, where their primary rasa in spiritual life is analysis, contemplation, discussion. Now, somebody may approach from a very introvert perspective. That means, they just like to be alone. In seclusion, they want to think about Krishna. They want to read alone. They love to go on pilgrimages alone. Somebody may come from a very extrovert perspective. That means, even if they want to study scripture, they want to find somebody and let's read the books together. They flourish, even if they read something, after that they have to talk about it with someone. They delight in the association of devotees. So now everybody needs association. But my point I'm making is, Krishna is all attractive means different people can come from very different perspectives. So some people can come very much from a heart perspective. Heart means, they love devotees. They love Krishna. Now, love can be used in many different ways, but it's filled with emotion. Somebody can come from a very head perspective. Head means they want analysis, they want logic. And when they come from that perspective, then sometimes the heart and the head, the two devotees may not be able to get along with that. That's why one principle in bhakti is that we need like-minded association. Sajatiya Sangha. Sajatiya means, this jati, nowadays it refers to caste, jati. But Sajatiya means like the same kind of mind, the similar, like-minded. So intellectual devotees will naturally flourish in the association of other intellectual devotees. Those devotees who love rituals. They will probably become pujaris, they will love that service. And then they will want to associate other devotees who are in that service. And in that they will flourish. So Krishna is large enough to attract many different people from different backgrounds. So why are we starting with this here? And the point I was making is that when we approach this topic of science and spirituality, so I found that I was very attracted by science and spirituality, but he mentioned in the introduction that I came with Radheshampu, same time with Radheshampu. That's not Radheshampu is my Shiksha Guru. I came out. He was the person who I was intellectually most attracted to. He came 1991, 92. I came 96, 97. So he was already a preacher by that time. But so when I came there, I was interested in science and spirituality, and he was interested in science and spirituality. The remote is here. You try this. So, but nobody else was interested in science and spirituality. So, in one sense, all of us, several devotees from my batch in college, we joined together. But this subject, it didn't interest anyone else. So now Radheshampu that I saw that I was interested, so then he would spend a lot of time talking, he would answer many of my questions. But so this was both a need and an interest for me. I needed that as a conviction for myself. And it was interest because I had a curiosity in that direction. So the topic we are going to discuss today will be a bit technical subject, and not everybody will, among you also, when you are coming to spiritual path, generally for some of us, initially we may need this for our own conviction, for our own clarity, our own conviction. Later on, if this becomes your interest and this becomes your service or one of your services, then you can explore it further. So that individual part, which I said I'm going to talk later at the conclusion, but I want to start it off. So this was my interest, and this is still one of my interests. But it is not my main interest right now. So with this contextualization, let's move to the historical perspective. So first, as I said, I'll talk from the Western historical perspective, then I'll come to India. If we know how things worked out in the West, so in the West there was what they call as the scientific revolution. So now when we talk about the West, we often think of the West as materialistic. But previously, everything in the West also was quite religious. So the scientific revolution was the time when science really took off. And before that, in India the religious conceptions are not similar, but still there was some similarity. Before that, the idea was it was almost as if this world we are living in here, this world is a temporary place, and the primary thing is just live over here and get out of this world and go to God. That was the primary focus. In the Bible also, the word Dukhalaya Shashvatam doesn't come, but the idea is that this world is a vale of tears. That this is also a place of distress. That was there. And yes, life was tough. Pre-scientific time, there were wars and famines and diseases and all those things were there. Life was tough. But there were two historical moments before that. That is what they call it the Renaissance. Renaissance was where people started changing their view of the world. So, roughly, this is end of the 15th century. You could say, the precise dates vary, but around 15th, 16th century this happened. All this happened between 16th to 17th centuries. So there was the Renaissance, there was the Reformation, and there was the Scientific Revolution. So Renaissance was basically what? People started focusing on this world also. That the point is not just to tolerate this world and go back to God. The point is we want to understand this world, we want to explore this world. So at the time art started exploding, beauty started, art, music. It became much more, you could say, inclusive, not just about God all the time. And that's when people started looking at nature with a view of curiosity. And then at that time the religious influence was still there. So we can consider Galileo or Newton. Most of these pioneers of science, they were all grew up in a religious environment and they themselves were religious in many ways. So then as we started exploring nature, the idea started coming that because these people were religious and they were exploring nature, so the idea came that can we appreciate the glory of God through nature? So although in history, as you know, they talk about that Galileo was persecuted by the church because of the idea that he said that the earth is not at the center of the universe. Mm-hmm. But that was more of a political institutional struggle. It was not that Galileo was against God. Galileo himself always believed in God. So it was more of the technical word uses theopolitics. Theopolitics is politics associated with religion. So it is more of a political than a philosophical struggle. But Galileo had this idea, he pioneered it, many subsequent scientists continued it, that God speaks to us through scripture and God also speaks to us through nature. And he said these are the two messengers of God. Now this idea is there in our tradition also, where we have the 11th canto, there are 24 gurus. By observing nature, there are various lessons that are learned. If you are at Radhanath Maharaj's journey home, when he also goes to the Himalayas, he studies, he observes and he learns. This is not but the idea was, this is not just learning general life lessons from nature. That his idea at that time was scientific insights, or you could say scientific discoveries for them were actually spiritual insights. What do I mean by that? That understanding how the world works was the idea that understanding how God makes the world work. So originally it started with a very theistic orientation. So now this quote is attributed to Leibniz or Galileo or Newton, different people, but basically he said that, "O Father, I think thy thoughts after thee." I think thy thoughts after thee. What it means? The thought that you put in making this world. I am discovering that thought. It's like if the parent a father makes a toy at home for a child. The child is playing with the toy, and the child starts figuring out how was this toy made. Oh, this one is put like this is put like this. So then it's like, I think thy thoughts after thee. So the idea became, at this time, science was very clearly a theistic endeavor. Not atheistic, but a theistic endeavor. And it's interesting how they saw science and spirituality at that time. Their idea is, even if you consider the incident that is said to have started off science. I was in Cambridge a few months ago. I spoke there on the existence of God. So there they showed me, while passing by, there is what is called a Newton tree. So not the original tree under which Newton sat and the apple fell. But the idea is that many universities in the West, they have like descendants of that tree, or you could say replicas of that tree. And the idea is those trees, they are considered to be like contemplation spots. So they are pilgrimage places for scientists. So if you go there, you've got such a brilliant insight over here. We'll also get to become some good insight over here. So now when Newton sat under that tree, and that apple fell on his head. And then he thought, okay, what makes this apple fall? So when he wanted to understand what made the apple fall, he was not interested in the explanation God made the apple fall. Now he believed in God, but his interest was what is the mechanism by which the apple fell. So basically, the idea is that every event that happens, you can find explanations at multiple levels. So for example, right now, this projector stopped working. So the projector stopped working. It could be that maybe the connection here is wrong. Maybe the power supply has gone off. Maybe the tablet has stopped working in terms of being able to project it. Maybe the projector has stopped working. So we could go from one bigger explanation. So if the projection is stopping, the first explanation we'll go to is not, oh, this projector is defective, let me throw away the projector. No. So we generally, whenever we look for an explanation, we start from a smaller explanation and then we move towards a bigger explanation. And the idea is that there could be multiple explanations for the same event. So if the projector is working, that means all things are working together. This connection is right, the tablet has the capacity to project, the projector is working, the wire is working. So when something works, there are multiple causes that contribute to it working. And when something is not working, we may see what exactly is not working, isn't it? So if somebody is watching, some people, there is a psychological defect called catastrophizing. Catastrophizing means what? That when something goes wrong, people think everything has gone wrong. So like somebody sits down to watch TV and they can't hear anything. And what has happened is they sat on the remote and they press the mute button. And they can't hear, think, oh, I've gone deaf. So that small problem go to a huge level. That's not required, isn't it? But what happens is, why am I talking about this? Multiple levels of explanation. So we can focus on two levels. That one is when the apple fell. So this is the event. The apple fell. So broadly, there could be two levels of explanation. One is the level of mechanism. Now another is the level of the system being created, system's source. We could say that, okay, this is the mechanism by which it works. But where did the mechanism come from? So the ultimate explanation is God. But when Newton wanted to know what made the apple fall, he was not interested in the ultimate explanation. He was interested in the mechanism by which it happens. So that mechanism he came up with, it was gravity. And that's a brilliant insight. So since that time, now interestingly, neither Newton nor Galileo, they called themselves as scientists. The word science itself came in the 18th century. So they called themselves technically as natural philosophers. If you know the name of the book that Newton wrote, it was about the book of natural philosophy. That natural philosophy means, there's no unnatural philosophy. What he meant by natural philosophy is philosophy through the observation of nature. So the word science itself came later. So they observed nature and they philosophized about how nature works. And when their approach was scientific, they are focusing on one particular way of looking at nature. And they're natural philosophers, so the thought system that they came up with was naturalism. Naturalism means that we want to understand how nature works, and we want to understand natural causes for the natural phenomena. But by natural, again, here, the opposite of natural is not unnatural, but supernatural. So God, this natural, we could roughly equate it with material. Now there's a difference between material and materialistic. Like there's material is just functionally observing matter. Materialistic is pursuing material as a source of pleasure. So science basically was, in that sense, focused on material reality. So naturalism is the idea that we want to look for natural explanations for natural phenomena. Now those natural explanations ultimately come from God. That was understood. But that God was not the primary focus. The focus was the material mechanisms, the natural mechanisms. So this naturalism had two distinct aspects to it. There was methodological naturalism, that there might be other explanations, but we are interested in seeing what is the natural explanation for this phenomenon. And then there is metaphysical naturalism. That means this is the only mechanism, and there is nothing more that is there. So initially it was that this explanation is also there, this explanation is also there. But science focus was on finding this explanation. So this is naturalism, focus of science, but this was what? Methodological naturalism. Now when metaphysical naturalism comes in, metaphysics is the study above physics, the higher reality. So when metaphysical naturalism started coming, then science started becoming atheistic. And I'll talk about that shortly. But the point is that originally, for the scientists, or those who were the pioneers of science, there was no contradiction between science and God. In fact, we could say far from a contradiction between science and God, it was that they were seeing nature as a means to appreciate the glory of the God who had designed nature. Who had designed, could be one word for it, or who had made the mechanisms by which nature works. So now, there was no conflict in this at all. But as science started explaining more and more and more things, so science started evolving. So, or we can say devolving. So what happened was, there are three broad schools of thought. There is theism, there is atheism, and in between there is deism. So let me explain what these are. See, there is God as the creator and God as the controller. So the role of God. So in theism, God is both the creator and the controller. That the idea is the principle of gravity, Newton's idea was it came from God and it is sustained by God. Now, as science started explaining more and more material phenomena through scientific methods, then the idea started coming that in the operation of the universe, there is no scope for God. That now the whole universe works according to natural phenomena. So, if I throw this phone down, say, why would you throw this phone down? It's foolish. But if the object is thrown down, it breaks. Now, how that phenomena exactly happens, there is no role for God to play it. Depending on the force with which I throw it and the kind of surface that is there below, based on that much it will get damaged. Or if it's a ball, it will bounce up. So, a material event can be exhaustively explained without needing God. That became the idea. And this was deism. Deism is God is the creator but not the controller. So we could consider, for example, look at that clock over there. Now clock clearly has a designer. But is that designer controlling the clock now? No. The clock clearly works according to mechanism. The clock could not have come by chance. But now its current working is entirely by design, by its mechanism, its design. So Now, if we can understand its mechanism, then we can tweak it. Isn't it? Okay, we can tweak it in the sense that, okay, it's gone behind, we want to make it come ahead. Or if we want to mislead someone, we can change the time only. So we can do what we want with it. So God is the source, God is the creator, but God is not the controller. The controller is who? The laws of nature. Now this itself was a question. So Newton and other scientists, they were theists. There was a philosopher who also does, his name is Spinoza. He was a primary proponent of deism. There are many others. But their idea became that if God is not the controller, that itself is a problem for religion. That means if you pray to God, God is not in control. So what is the use of praying to Him? Now, there were some theologians who came up with the idea that they tried to separate the domain. There's the personal and the public. So God can't really, the events in the outer world happen by laws of nature. But praying to God can change your mind, can give you more positivity. So basically, the personal and the public spheres were separated. And that's how faith in God was preserved. But then, as science started advancing further, and science started coming up with mechanical explanations, or at least science thought it is coming up with theories that could explain the origin of the universe. And when that happened, then God was not the controller and God is not the creator. So this is primarily post-Darwin. Now Darwin himself was not exactly an atheist. Darwin initially wanted to actually become a priest, but then his daughter died, his child died because of a disease, and he felt very distant from God, and he immersed himself thereafter in traveling and observing nature, and then he came up with his theory of evolution. So now, what evolution claimed was that everything that we see in nature is a result of natural phenomena. And if it is a result of natural phenomena, then there is no need for God. Now still, Darwin at that time, so even evolution itself, let's move forward. So currently, the mainstream science, the mainstream idea that is associated with science is that within the scientific worldview, we don't need God as the controller, we don't need God as the creator. Now we could call this technically as atheistic, but science primarily is non-theistic. Now atheistic means we don't believe in God. Non-theistic means we don't need God. God may exist, but for explaining the working of the universe or even explaining the origin of the universe, we don't need God. Now the difference between non-theism and atheism is subtle, but it's a significant difference. That's why we can't say that all scientists are atheists. That's not true at all. But in the worldview of science, there is no place for God. As of now, currently the way it is. So now with respect to Darwin also, with respect to evolution, there are two aspects of evolution. There is what is called as biological evolution and there is chemical evolution. So biological evolution is basically the various life forms, various species that exist. So from unicellular organism came multicellular, from multicellular came various complex living beings, including the whole life form that we see. Now chemical evolution is where from chemicals the first life form came. Now with respect to scientific evidence itself, the evidence for biological evolution is stronger and the evidence for chemical evolution is weaker. The stronger doesn't mean, is it really strong enough to prove it? We'll discuss that later. But relatively speaking, even within the scientific world, chemical evolution is much on weaker grounds than biological evolution. Now, biological evolution itself may not be on very strong grounds, but we will talk about that. But chemical evolution is definitely on much weaker grounds. However, for an alternative worldview to be created. That is, that there is no room for God in science and there is no need for God at all. For that, chemical evolution also has to be true. So basically, that with respect to origin, there are three questions. Which, when we say God as the creator, so in origin, there is the origin of the universe. Then there is the origin of life. And there is the origin of humans. So now why do we differentiate life and humans? Because in the Christian worldview at least, humans are seen to be special. So in Christian worldview, the soul is present only in human beings. And the idea is that only humans are, Jesus came to save human beings. Human beings have the light of reason, what we call as Brahma Jigyasa, they call it the light of reason. Thomas Aquinas talks about that. That only they can perceive God and they can pursue God. So humans exist in a special category. So there are three questions: the origin of the universe, origin of life, and ultimately the origin of humans. So now the origin of universe was explained by science through the Big Bang. The origin of life was explained through the idea of chemical evolution. And the origin of humans was explained through biological evolution. Now, how much this explanation is actually coherent, how much it is defensible, that we can explore. But this is how science historically became associated with atheism. That this is the claimed understanding, that we don't need God at all. And for most people, so now that like you probably, before we talked about this, you may not even have thought about or heard the term, thought about the difference between non-theism and atheism, isn't it? So if we ask really serious scientists, even today, they will say that science is non-theistic. But the common conception is that if you are really scientific, you should not be believing in God and all this stuff. They associate with atheism. So now, going back to our point of, so this is the history of science, and that is where we are right now. So, one more point I'll make from the historical perspective before we go to the philosophical perspective. That is, there were thinkers, including some philosophers, who thought that science and God will be in inverse proportion. What do they mean? That as science grows, what will happen is belief in God will go away. So that was the idea. So there was Friedrich Nietzsche, was a prominent philosopher. He famously said God is dead. So his idea was that, now he did not say it in a cheerful sense. He said that God is the center of the conceptual universe that humans have. And if God is no longer existing, then humans will become very scattered and society will become very disorganized. So he did not celebrate that. But still his point was that science, when he said God is dead, what he meant that the concept of God itself is irrational. So God never existed in one sense. But the worldview that allowed people to believe in God, that worldview has been destroyed by science. And therefore, in that sense, God is dead. So this was what they expected. As science advances, the idea was belief in God will die. In that sense, God as a concept will die. So I was in Australia about 6-7 years ago, and there was an interfaith panel discussion, and I was presenting Hinduism over there. And the topic was, why hasn't God died till now? So what it meant was that there has been a remarkable resurgence in religion. If we consider the whole globe, the Middle East, if we consider, it is quite religious. Now we can question if it is fanatical or whatever, but religion has come back. And it's not that people there are unscientific completely. There is, the whole oil technology is there. Some amount of science education is there. Now we often think of America as materialistic. But America, the Central America and the Southern America, they are all very aggressively Christian. The coastal America is both coasts, east and west coast, they are much more materialistic. So Hollywood is in the west coast. So America, in the Western world, America is the most religious country. And that's why, when I was going to New Zealand, so when a Kiwi person was talking to me, so where do you travel and speak? I said, I almost spent 3 to 4 months a year in America. He said, oh, America, the religious nuts who elected Trump. So their idea is, in the Western world, America is seen as a too religious country. So France is probably the most atheistic country. England is also quite atheistic. Australia, New Zealand are also quite atheistic, relatively speaking. There's still significant amount of religious practice. But now Africa is also quite religious. Africa is more or less divided. Almost 50% is aggressively Muslim, 50% is aggressively Christian. Not 50%, 40-40. Then about 20% is originally the Native American religions are there. Now if you consider India, religion is resurging over here. So basically, religion has had a remarkable staying power. And the biggest religious resurgence has happened in Russia or former Soviet Russia. So after the fall of communism, all these countries, they started becoming more and more religious. So the idea, the simple narrative that, belief in God is irrational, and as science progresses, rationality progresses, people will become more atheistic. That has not actually happened in society in general. So this is the history. Now let's move forward to the philosophical part. So when I talk about philosophy, what do I mean? That in the current worldview is that science through nature, by studying nature, by understanding the laws of nature, can explain various things. And therefore, there is no need for God. Now you could say there are two different things. There is no need for God and there is no place for God. So no need for God is non-theism. No place for God is atheism. So science, what it says, so now at a conceptual level, it says there is no need for God or no place for God. Now technically speaking, science is more precisely where? Here. This is non-theism. So science is technically over here. No place would be atheism. So what has happened is that across the world, both at a mass level, people have a need for religious practice. So in fact, in Europe, there's a lot of aggressive atheism propagated after 9/11. 9/11 was the time the Twin Towers fell in America. And after that, there was atheistic writers wrote books saying that God is that religion is the source of all evil, God is a delusion, like that. Many books came out. But they found that no matter how many, one atheist wrote a book that he said, if you're a religious person, I'm giving you a warning, don't read this book. Because if you read this book, by the time you finish reading this book, you will be an atheist. So that was the level of not confidence but arrogance. Now many people wrote and refuted his book and other things. But we found that despite there's a lot of intellectual debate, people didn't really become atheistic in mass. So now atheists have sort of changed their strategy. Now there are a whole like religion for atheists. There is religion for atheists, meditation for atheists, yoga for atheists, prayers for atheists. So the idea is that their reasoning is what? That religion fulfills some psychological needs of people. Psychological need is people want to belong to a community. People want to do some shared activities. People want to do some practices that connect them with some higher reality. So we want to provide that within an atheistic framework. So I was in Stanford, and there they had created something called a meditation helmet. No, they're not created, they're trying to create. So what has happened is that science has very strongly found evidence that meditation is very good for mental health. Now, mental health, there is a subjective component to it that people, I feel better after meditating. But there is an objective component to it in terms of neural imaging. Like with various brain scans. If a person is, say, for example, addicted, then their brain wires are, the brain neurons as we call them, they are wired in particular ways. So now we cannot know what a person is addicted to, but if a person is addicted, to some extent, through neural imaging, we can understand. If a person is very angry, a person is is in great pain, to some extent neural imaging can indicate that. Now how accurate, that's open to question. But basically, neural imaging has shown that people who meditate regularly, their brains are structurally and chemically healthier. The brain wirings which associated with those areas which promote happiness, peace, acceptance, those are all higher. Forgiveness, things like that. So what they are trying to do, they are trying to say that, okay, we will create a helmet which will give electrical stimuli which will activate those parts of the brain that are associated with feelings of wellness. So whatever effect comes through meditation, you can have that by wearing the helmet. Now, this project has not been successful much. And it's like, see, this is where there is a fundamental oversimplification of spirituality. Science operates on a principle of reductionism. Reductionism means what? That a complex reality can be reduced to simpler components. Like say, if this tablet is working. So how does the tablet work? Oh, okay, it has a monitor, it has a CPU, it has a keyboard, it has this. And each of them has a particular role. And when all of them combine together, then the overall effect comes. So now reductionism is very useful as a tool for understanding complicated realities. However, does reductionism work everywhere? So can reductionism, for example, explain people's behavior, people's personality? So, what do you mean by people's personality? That there are conscious life forms. So, if a person, each of us has a particular individual nature. Now, we could say that we are shaped by our past karma, we are shaped by our parents, we are shaped by our environment, we are shaped by our education. So many factors are there. Who we are. But can we reduce an individual down to like tangible physical factors, their entire behavior? We cannot. Like two people may grow in the same neighborhood. Like the most drastic example for this is, so reductionism works for things. Reductionism, does it work for people? So the most dramatic example in science for this is what is called as identical twins. Now twins are those people the two people who are born more or less at the same time. But identical twins are where the same zygote splits into two. In that case, the two twins are genetically not just similar but identical. And sometimes you may have seen two twins, they don't look similar at all because they're non-identical twins. But there are identical twins. They are genetically not just similar, they are identical. Now, if we are just made of our genes, then both these identical twins rather, they should be completely identical in their personality. Now, especially if they lived together, they went to they stayed in the same house, they had the same parent, they went to the same college. I know two twins in America. They're both scientists, they're both PhD, they're both in the same field. So like since the time they were born, they've always been together. They studied also together in junior college, in senior college, in PhD. They're working also in the same job. So they've always been together. But still, if you spend about 10 minutes with them, you'll see that they're very different personalities. So then the question comes up, where does this difference come from? If a living being could be divided, if a human being could be explained in terms of the parts. Now we are not talking about biological parts, heart and kidney and that kind of thing. Okay, the behavior and personality is shaped by what factors? The factors are the same. But again, can we explain human beings solely in terms of material factors? So now from our understanding, we understand that each person is a soul, and the soul has its own samskaras from previous life. More importantly, the soul has free will. So reductionism does not work. So philosophical person. Now, I think this again, this is not a criticism of science. This is a philosophical evaluation of one particular operating principle of science. So I talk about methodological naturalism. We want natural explanation of natural phenomena. So how do we come up with natural explanations? We look at a particular thing and try to divide it into its components, and then see how those components contribute for its explaining some things. But can a thing be more than its parts? So that is a fundamental question, and we do see. So reductionism does not work so well in terms of in explaining our lived reality, in explaining how we function in the world today. Science is a very powerful tool, but science as a tool has fabulous success in explaining some aspects of reality. But does it explain all of reality? So can it explain human nature? Can it explain why is a particular person having a particular personality? If everything were working according to the laws of nature, one of the features of the laws of nature is that it's predictable. Predictable means if I throw an object down with a particular force, then you can predict how soon it will fall away. So if everything were explainable by science, then and human beings can also be explained through methodological naturalism. So nature can be explained. Can human beings and human behavior and human nature be explained through methodological naturalism? If that were true, then human behavior should also be predictable. Isn't it? The object of, like in the cosmological bodies, we can predict, okay, this particular planet is over here now, this particular star is over here, 50 years down the line it will be over there. So nature and natural objects are predictable. Why are human beings not predictable like that? And if they are not predictable, that's our obvious experience. So is this non-predictability, where does it come from then? So what I'm talking about here is, we are trying to look at from a philosophical perspective, does science leave room for other bodies of knowledge? We're not talking about God primarily right now, we're just talking about other bodies of knowledge. So there is science and there is scientism. So, and if you heard this word scientism, it's not very common. So scientism is a combination of two words, science plus imperialism. Now imperialism is, for example, in Britain, it had its imperial power expansion, it conquered India. So that colonization is the specific act of conquering, but imperialism is, we are supreme. So when science tries to claim that either we are the supreme body of knowledge or we are the only body of knowledge. So science and scientism are not the same thing. Science at one level is a tool. So a tool means what? It's not within science you could have physical tools like microscopes, and we can have large hadron colliders and all those very sophisticated tools we can have. But science is more of an intellectual tool, a particular way of looking at the universe to understand how things work. Now scientism is not a tool. Scientism is a thought system. You could call it an ideology. It is more of a thought system. So there is now, within science itself, there is no experiment or any theory also within science which proves scientism. Scientism is what? Science can provide all explanations. Science can answer all questions. Science can explain all of reality. See, when science started with methodological naturalism, what does it mean? We are looking for natural explanations for natural phenomena. Now, how can science explain all questions? There are two ways. That apart from natural reality, there is no other reality. That's one way. And the other is that if there are some other realities, they still arise from natural realities. And then the scientific word is epiphenomena. There's a phenomena and something arises from that is epiphenomena. Like if a coal train is driving, smoke comes from it. So the train driving is the main phenomena. The smoke coming out of it is epiphenomena. So sometimes scientists try to propose that the brain is the phenomena and consciousness is like the smoke coming out from the brain. That's the epiphenomena. Now, that's a super simplistic explanation and it really doesn't work. And I won't go into why it doesn't work. But my point is, these are two ways it can work. That everything that exists is only nature, or whatever exists simply comes from nature. But this does not explain our lived reality. What do I mean by lived reality? See, this is the world, let's put it this way. This is the world of science. The world of science means that what science studies, what science explains. And we could say this is the human world. The world in which human beings live. What do I mean by the world in which human beings live? That, see, there are many things in the human world which science, in one sense, not only does not explain, it actually doesn't even address them. What are those things? Let's consider pain. Now, one purpose of medical science is to prevent pain or to cure pain. But with all our scientific advancement, there is no such thing as a painometer. Now, scientists may have some scale of pain, but it's more subjective. Okay, how much pain do you feel? Is it tolerable? Like something I saw one cartoon where why the person got a fracture, a common emergency, and the doctors are asking the patient, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much is your pain? The patient says, what, 10,000? So, now the idea is that there is no such thing as a pain-o-meter. Now, pain is a big human experience. It's not a desirable human experience, but still it's a huge human experience. And the science approaches the body basically biochemically, anatomically, physiologically, whatever, but from a materialistic perspective. Now, we can say there is some subjective dysfunction of the body which leads to pain, and that is true. And science can try to address that. But pain is a subjective experience. Now, is it a real experience? Yeah, it is definitely real in the sense that somebody is going through pain. You tell them your pain is just an illusion. They will say, I'll make your existence an illusion. So, it's a real experience. Similarly, if we consider love, nowadays, if you see the top 10 fears of people, every psychologists try to find out in the 20th century what are the top 10 fears, 21st century, 19th century, as far as they can find out. So among the top 10 fears of the 21st century, 2 fears have come up. One is the fear of terrorists, specifically terrorists, not just fear of attackers, but fear of terrorists. And second is the fear of rejection. And like somebody's in a relationship and nowadays people use the word breakup they use, but there's no up, it's breakdown. So now, people have a lot of insecurity and fear. So now say if a boy proposes to a girl, please marry me. And the girl says, okay, why do you? I love you. The girl says, okay, here's a love-o-meter, let me put it in. Let me see if you really love me. No, you cannot do that. We all want to love and we all have felt loved at times. But if somebody asks us, does your mother love you? Of course. What is the scientific proof that your mother loves you? I don't need scientific proof. I have hundreds of experiences by which I know that my mother loves me. But science cannot quantify that. Science cannot measure that. Science cannot prove that. So there is much in the human world that is not within the scope of science. Now, can the scope of science advance to include that? That's a different question. Let's put that aside. But the fact is, the human world and the world of science, they are two different worlds. And there are many things in the world of science that make no sense within the human world. So, for example, the quantum world. Now, if you see the world that we experience, it's a world of objects. I'm touching this, I can touch this. It's a world of objects. But if we try to see, quantum physics works phenomenally well. And the accomplishments with now quantum computing coming up, what quantum computing can do is phenomenal. So it is certainly a theory of nature which works in some way. But originally, science was supposed to be an explanation, or is supposed to provide explanation of observed reality. Okay, an apple fell, why did the apple fall? So now it is supposed to help us make sense of the observed world. Isn't it? That was the purpose of science. We see and we try to, we do observe, and then we do some theory, we do experiments. That was the purpose of science. So within science, there are two main schools of thought. There is empiricism. Empiricism is something similar to pratyaksha praman, as we say. Empirical evidence. And the other is rationalism. Rationalism is more anuman praman. That it's rational means you have a theory explaining it. So now ideally, the empirical and the rational should go together. That we observe with our empirical senses, and with our mind we come up with a rational explanation for that. And say Newtonian physics brought both of these together. That Newtonian physics was what? We observe objects falling, and then we come up with explanations for, okay, why do the objects fall? Why do the planets move? So Newton's theory had such an elegance to it, and the same phenomena which can explain an object fall can also explain the movement of planets. So the simplicity and the comprehensiveness of that theory was astonishing. So basically, it helped people get a coherent worldview to some extent. But then, if we consider, as science started studying things more and more, empiricism and rationalism, they started going in different, even opposite directions. So the biggest split between empiricism and rationalism happened with quantum physics. So Niels Bohr was a prominent proponent of quantum physics, and Einstein was proponent of relativity. So now, according to quantum physics, now what I'm giving is a very simple explanation of quantum physics. It's technically, it's so complex. There's one quantum physicist, he said that if you think you have understood quantum physics, that is the proof you have not understood quantum physics. So the world is not only stranger than what you imagine, it is stranger than what you can imagine. That's their idea. So now, what is it? According to quantum physics, at a very simple level, there is no object existing at all. There's no such thing as a bar existing. It's all like there is a quantum wave function, and when there is an observer, that presence of the observer and the act of observation leads to the wave function collapsing. Again, very simple explanation. It may not be very precisely accurate. It's a non-technical explanation. That's when an object comes in perception. So now, Einstein had criticized this and he says, I would like to believe that the moon continues to exist even if I am not looking at it. No, actually, according to quantum physics, it doesn't exist. Now you may say that that's ridiculous. How can objects are there? What do you mean by quantum wave function collapses and objects come into perception and there's a perception. That makes no sense. And that is true. You can say quantum physics makes no empirical sense. And yet, quantum mathematics, quantum physics, quantum calculations work like crazy. They work so precisely that with quantum physics, a spacecraft high up in the sky, if there is a coin fallen on the street in New York, whether that is a $1 coin or a $5 coin, with quantum technology you can observe and we can measure that. So it works at one particular level. So it works at a rational level. So that's why one quantum student, he asked a famous quantum physics professor, "Sir, how do I make sense of quantum physics?" So his professor famously said, "Stop thinking, start calculating." So the maths works fantastically. But to get like a sensory picture of what this means, that just doesn't work. That's why I said that much of the world of quantum physics, so the world of science, is quite different from the human world. So there is much in the human world that science can't explain, and there is much in the science world that the human mind can make no sense of. So that's why these two worlds are not completely identical. And one of the things that has happened, that because of the split between quantum physics and relativity, we move forward. Relativity to some extent at least makes some sense in empirical terms also. So one of the things that has happened is science also has had to develop some humility. What do I mean by humility? That, see, these two theories, like Newtonian physics, it was one integrated theory that seems to explain much of the observed universe. But relativity and quantum physics, these are two hugely different theories, and bringing them together has been almost an impossible task. So there are some scientists who tried to do it. So Stephen Hawking was a prominent pioneer in trying to do that. So what there's a grand unified theory, GUT call it, or theory of everything, TOE. So now, Stephen Hawking, toward the end of his life, he said that I am happy to announce that humanity's quest for knowledge will never end. Now, it sounds very attractive, but what he meant to say, that's a BBC, I think Guardian had put a news, that even Stephen Hawking admits failure, that we will never come up with a theory of everything. So the idea is that, let me explain this now, this is where, philosophically, where there is scope for science and spirituality. That, if we consider this is a territory, or let's put it, this is a reality. I'll come to the territory example later. This is reality. Now, the current mainstream understanding of science is that all that we can have are models of reality. That all that we can, so science can provide us not an explanation of reality, but a model of reality. And that model of reality explains some aspects of reality. So the idea that one model can explain all of reality, or one model can include all models. I hope the word model is clear. What do I mean by a model? Model is like a conceptual framework which can explain things. So currently the idea is, even in mainstream physics, it's accepted that there will never be any one model that can explain all of reality. So another way to understand this is, if this is a territory, we put it over here. This is the territory. Now, for a territory, we can make different maps of the territory. So we can have a physical map, we can have a political map. So now, in one sense, physical map means there's a river over here, there's a hill over here, there are farms over here. Political map could mean that, okay, this country ends over here, this district is over here, this state is over here. Now we can have a mineral map, which are the areas, what kind of topsoil is there. We can have different maps. And each map is a tool for understanding the territory. But there are two different things. that the territory and the map are different. And no matter how exhaustive the map is, there'll always be there something in the territory that is more than what can come in the map. So, science offers us maps of the territory of natural reality. Now, maps are very powerful. If you don't have a map and we are searching to find a particular place, it will be very difficult. So, maps are extremely useful, you can say even essential. But still, the map is not the territory. Isn't it? The map is not the territory. So, if I am here and I have a friend over here, now I can know through the map the path that I should follow to get to the home of my friend. But just moving my finger on the map is not going to give me the joy of meeting the friend. Isn't it? Actually, I have to move in the territory and then I will reach that particular place and meet my friend. So now, if I say, the more I follow a map, now with this philosophical framework, let's go back and look at the history of science, now what we understood. That, say, if from here, I am supposed to go to some nearby city. Say, if from here I am going to drive to Hyderabad. So then how long is 6 hours drive? 8 hours.
8 hours.
8 hours drive. So now, initially I take a map, and the map says turn left, and then you'll come to a bridge. Then go straight, and then you will come to a hill. And go right, now you'll come to a river. Now the more I follow the map, the more my faith in the map will increase. If I encounter the same things that are predicted in the map. And that's good. But if I am going to Hyderabad to meet a friend, and as I keep moving forward, my faith in the map increases. And then I go to my friend's house and I knock on the door. And my friend opens, hey, welcome, so nice to see you. And I look at my map. I say, you don't exist in this map. Therefore, you don't exist. A friend will say, your brain doesn't exist. So, see, it is important to have faith in a tool, but it's also important to recognize that we can't reduce reality to the tool. So we respect science, but scientism reduces all of reality to the model created by science. So that is where the problem comes in. So now, if we consider this multi-model reality, that if there are multiple models, so then this leaves us an opening. Can spirituality also be one model that explains reality? Like science has different theories which can explain reality. So can spirituality also be one model? So then, if we move forward, this is now we are going towards the individual aspect of it. But the idea is that there is a territory. And now there is one model, which is the model of science. Another model is the model of spirituality. Now broadly, science and spirituality. Now how do we define this? The science is the study of matter. Spirituality is the study of what matters. Of what matters. What is really important in life. When Parikshit Maharaj was cursed to die in 7 days, at that time, he is not primarily interested in getting a PhD in cosmology. Although there is some description of the cosmos in the 5th canto. No, his interest is in knowing what is the most important thing that we should focus on. What really matters. Arjuna also had his kind of technology. We may or may not believe in it. But that's the different question. Arjuna had his kind of technology. But the point is, when Arjuna was studying the Bhagavad Gita, he was not interested in the study of matter. He was interested in the study of what matters. On one side is fighting, which will give me the kingdom, but that will cause me to lose my relatives. Especially I lose Bhishma and Drona. On the other side is not fighting. If I don't fight, then Duryodhana will rule the world. Duryodhana will persecute me, persecute my family, persecute my loved ones. So what is important over here? What really matters? So that is the question that spirituality answers. So if we understand that reality is very complex and reality can be explained by different models, each of which serves a different purpose, then multiple models can coexist. Not only can coexist, they can actually complement and reinforce each other. So now how this will happen, I will just give 2-3 examples of this, and then I'll conclude and we can have some question answers. That there are 2 problems. Like I gave a rough explanation. Science is the study of matter and spirituality is the study of what matters. Now there could be 2 ways this science and spirituality coming together is some harmony or at least coexistence possible. One is that science claims to explain everything. On one side, science gives all explanations, or science claims to give all explanations, and leaves no room for spirituality. And the other is, spirituality claims to have all explanations, and leaves no room for science. Both ways, what can happen is, there can be a conflict. So till now, we discussed about how science going towards scientism has happened, but scientism itself is not a scientifically proven idea. It's not a scientifically proven theory. It's more like what we may call a thought system or ideology. And some scientifically minded people may believe that, but that is their belief. So we discussed how it doesn't have to be like this. Now we can go to the other side. Does spirituality claim to have all answers, and therefore spirituality leaves no place for science? So can this happen? This is where it can happen when there are superstitions. So what are superstitions? Let's take 2-3 examples of this. That now Christianity is spread all over the world. Like Islam is second religion, Christianity is the number 1 religion. So Christianity also has many different variations. And some of them are more hardline. There are, just like Islamic fanatics are there sometimes, there are Christian fanatics also. So there is one group of Christianity, they are very fringe, they are not prominent, but that's an example of spirituality. I'm using spirituality in general term over sense over here, of going against science. That is, so they have the idea that all your sufferings are because of your original sin, and if you accept Jesus as your savior, then you will be freed from all sins and you will have no suffering thereafter. So there was, for example, somebody has glasses. Say you accept Jesus as your savior, all your problems will be healed. Sometimes you may have heard about faith healing. Like, have you heard of this concept of faith healing? Yeah. Some Christian priests come, somebody in crutches comes on the dais and they throw some sprinkled water. And the person just throws away the crutches. I am healed! Jesus! Glory be to Jesus! I am saved! So now, this has been analyzed quite a bit. And not all of it is simply fake. Some of it is definitely fake. Those people are not crippled at all. They are healthy people who seem to walk on crutches and they just throw away the crutches. But there are few cases. So it's just a show. But sometimes what happens is that have you heard of this thing called placebo effect?
Yes.
So placebo effect is what? That sometimes a person may be given just sugar pills, not instead of giving medicine by a doctor. But because they think I have been given a medicine, they get cured. So now how does it work? The idea is that the current scientific explanation is that the body itself has its natural healing mechanism. And that is activated when our mind believes that we are being treated. So if we believe that we are being treated, then the body heals itself, even without needing the aid of chemicals. Now placebo effect does happen. But that doesn't mean placebo is a replacement for medicine. Isn't it? That doesn't mean that, you just believe you're being treated and you'll be cured of terminal cancer. It's not going to happen. So like that, sometimes some people, when they believe that, I got the sacred water sprinkled on me, now Jesus has saved me, Jesus healed me. So then, for some time, even people who are crippled, start walking like normal. But there are many cases where the mind can temporarily, with you can say what a hormonal rush, can go beyond the normal limitations of the body. Like it has happened sometimes if a mother or a father sees like a big car has fallen on their child, they'll suddenly be able to get superhuman force and push off the car. Now we may say in movies heroes doing that, but that's different. Now at that particular time, the mind, because of its emotions, can suddenly generate a burst of energy. And for a few moments they can do that. They can't do it regularly. But so sometimes it may be true that some people may seem to be healed. But if any religion starts claiming that because we are healing you, you shouldn't go to doctors at all. And if you go to doctors, that is a sign that you lack faith in God. Then this is where what is happening is, spirituality is infringing into the domain of science. The body works according to certain phenomena, certain mechanisms. And to some extent, medical science, whether it is naturopathy, allopathy, Ayurveda, that tries to understand the mechanisms and address the mechanisms. So the thing is that spirituality can also start infringing into the domain of science. And if that happens, then that is also a problem. Now there could be many examples of spirituality infringing into the domain of science. But technically speaking, this does not have to happen. So if we can understand that both of them have their scope. So how do we put it? Again, this is very simple, but let's take it in this terms. The science can improve through technology our outer world. Spirituality can improve our inner world. This is, as I said, this is a very simplified understanding, but broad principles. That if I want to go from here to America, because I'm a spiritual person doesn't mean that I'll refuse to take a plane. Isn't it? That's for outer world. The outer world, technology can help us navigate the outer world. But my inner world, in terms of understanding what kind of desires are there, what kind of anarthas are there, who am I really? And how can I manifest my core self? For that inner world, is spirituality. Now again, this is not that simple, and there are areas where there are conflicts, and those conflicts will have to be addressed. So for example, science has psychology, and more precisely psychiatry. Psychology is more talk therapy, psychiatry is more chemical based. You'll get prescribed some pills. That talks about the inner world also. So that is some area we'll have to explore. The spirituality will also give you some outer prescriptions. So outer prescription means, say for example, what kind of food we should eat, how we should live, how society should be organized. So there will be some areas where particular things might have some conflict and they need to be navigated. So for example, like say currently, I'll give two examples of this. Say I was in America about a couple of years ago, and one Prabhupada disciple told me that the Prabhupada said don't sleep more than 6 hours. And anyone sleeps more than 6 hours, that's tamoguna. He said that for 50 years, for more than 50 years, I slept for 4.5, 5.5 hours. But recently he said that my doctor told me, your body needs 7 hours. I said, I cannot do that. He said, no, my spiritual master. He said, you do it, you will be able to do better service. And he said that I've been sleeping 7 hours now, and he said my medical bill every year has decreased by almost $15,000. Because I was taking so many pills, and my body just needed some rest. So now different bodies are different. So I'm not saying all of us should sleep 7 hours.
Yeah.
But this is the particular case of what spirituality tells and what science tells. Now, this is something which has to be individually navigated. And there is that much scope for individuality. There is that much scope for individuality. Now, this is relatively simple. I'll take one more example and I'll conclude with this. When I go to Los Angeles, I stay with one devotee couple. So the Mataji is a evolutionary scientist. She's a PhD and she teaches evolution. So then I asked her, how do you reconcile your belief in evolution with what you learn from your job and your spirituality? How do you reconcile it? So she told me, I've stopped trying to reconcile it. This is my job and this is my spirituality. So then I've talked with many different devotees. This is one approach. This is basically like this is my different hats I wear. This is the hat of my profession and this is the hat of my spirituality. Now, so then I talked with one senior sannyasi guru. So I asked him that, if somebody believes in evolution, can they still practice bhakti? So he said, where does Krishna say that I disqualify you from practicing bhakti? So then now the question comes up. This is where it's a little dicey. And I won't say that I have a clear answer for this. That's why I said there's an individual aspect of it. So that there are some, if somebody is super specialized in a particular area. So this Mataji is telling me, evolution, it's obviously true. I see it happening all the time. In the sense that, like when we had the COVID at that time, the virus mutates. And that's why if you get one vaccine, the virus itself will mutate, another variant might come up, and the previous vaccine will not work. That things mutate, that's something which you observe constantly. And why does it happen? It's evolution. Now we say that's not actually evolution. That's where what I try to discuss. So what does evolution mean? So evolution can mean 3 different things. And evolution can refer to an observed phenomena. What does observed phenomena mean? That, as I said, that life forms change. That even one of the skills, that 24 skills that Krishna learned, 64 skills that Krishna learned at his Sandipani Mani's Gurukul. One of them is plant breeding. Plant breeding means what? You bring this plant, bring that plant together, and then you bring a red rose, you bring a blue rose, and you get another new color rose. So now what is this? This is, you could say, one idea of evolution. So that when you bring 2 species together, there's some combined variation, combination comes up. So do we as devotees have to say that I don't believe this? It's happening over there, isn't it? We don't have to falsify that. So that is very much true. If you read the Life Comes from Life, that's a conversation that Prabhupada had written. There's a book like that published, but that's only selections of the conversation. If you go deeper and you read the full unabridged conversation between Prabhupada and the devotees that happened in Venice Beach in Los Angeles, it's a much more nuanced conversation. So, and there's a whole conversation that Prabhupada had on Darwin with Shamsundar Prabhu, and that's published in Dialectical Spiritualism. But there also what is published is the abridged version. If you go and read the full unabridged version, when Prabhupada is presented some evidences, say for example, this particular life form, we have found fossils of this particular life form, and it seems to be like a hybrid between humans and animals, or it seems to be like a hybrid between reptiles and birds, or whatever. Now Prabhupada is not saying that this is false evidence. He's giving various possible explanations for how such a life form could exist. So at the level of observed phenomena, we have no problem with it. That in our understanding, what is it? That nature is created in such a way that nature is mutable. Mutable means nature is changeable. And if Krishna himself has learned plant breeding, what does that mean? that you can interbreed different species and they can have some changes. Now, beyond observed phenomena, there is a inferred mechanism. So, mechanism means here we have the theory of evolution. The inferred mechanism. Evolution as a theory which explains not just say how if we have normal apples of this size, we can have an apple this big or we can have an apple this small. A grape is of this small size, we can have this big grape also. So how does this happen? This is evolution. And if evolution is, that is what it means. Sometimes this is called as microevolution. Now with respect to microevolution, this is basically what is explaining variation within species. Now when we talk about macroevolution, that is the variation across species. That means from one species, another species comes. So now, is there evidence for macroevolution? Well, archaeologists will say there is. And we'll have to look at it. Now the mainstream body of science says that evolution, there is sufficient evidence for it. There is a significant minority of scientists, and not all of them are religious scientists. Even secular scientists, they say that evolution is not a sufficient explanation. So now, assuming, without getting into the merits, what I'm trying to do is, here, individually each one of us, in our particular field, will have to find out how we can reconcile science and spirituality. Or even whether we need to reconcile. Like this particular matter is, I'm not worried about it. I have my faith in Krishna, and this is the tool which I'm using for my job. It doesn't trouble me. Now sometimes somebody, that it doesn't trouble you troubles me. You know why? That's between her and Krishna. So why does it have to trouble you? So see, during Prabhupada's times, this is a very important point, that during Prabhupada's times, there was this hope. Because there was a claim that man had gone to the moon. And there was the claim that, see, the moon mission, whether it happened or not, what it represented is more important. What it represented was like almost the unlimited promise of science to achieve everything. And to some extent, that is not the case today. Like for most people today, people are still excited about science. People are still excited about getting the latest smartphone or getting what is the newest AI going to do. People are more alarmed and excited about AI right now because the feeling that it will take away our jobs. But whatever it is, see, right now for most people, there is no inherent tension between science and spirituality. That for most people today, whether it's the theory of evolution or the Big Bang theory, they don't see it as a threat to their spirituality. If they meet spiritual people, if what they speak makes sense, they become attracted to it. So it's like many times, I don't know in ISC how it works, but most places, when we do our Discover Yourself courses, first we have to tell people what is the Big Bang theory, and then we have to tell what is wrong with that theory. Isn't it? Isn't it? So that means the Big Bang theory is not an obstacle for them to come to Krishna. It's like we are assuming it's an obstacle, and we are informing them of the obstacle, and then we are removing the obstacle. So now for many people, evolution also is not an obstacle for their spirituality. Especially in the West, what has happened, there are in Christians, and there is one very vocal brand of Christians, they call it Young Earth Creationists. Young Earth Creationists, based on some verses from the Bible, they hold that the earth was created 6,000 years ago. Just 6,000 years ago. And that is like violently opposed to evolutionary theory. Not just opposed to evolutionary theory, it's opposed to much of history also. And then what happened? So they made a whole master plan. These Young Earth Creationists, they sent about, in one particular university, or many universities, they sent about 100, 200 students who were all completely convinced young earth creationists. They hid it all, hid their young earth creationism. They went and all got PhDs in evolution. And after they got the PhD, then they started using their PhD to criticize evolution. And they tried to use some scientific evidence in their own. See, the human mind can come up with anything. So they tried to come up with their theory, saying that everything, all of reality can be explained within 6,000 years. And now, so this really irritated scientists. And they say that you are using science to try to prove your irrational ideology. That is an abuse of science. So they say, what is the difference between a scientist and a religious scientist? They say the scientist is, this is the evidence. What is the theory to explain the evidence? And what is the religious scientist? This is the theory. Where is the evidence to support the theory? So they say that if you are a religious scientist, you are already biased. Now it's not that simple, because every scientist, when he comes up with a theory, they will look for the evidence for the theory, isn't it? And they will try to sideline the evidence that doesn't support their theory. So that is a normal operational procedure, but it can go towards extreme bias. So this is where, so basically what is happening? Evolution, to some extent, has become in the Western mind associated with young earth creation. Not evolution, criticism of evolution has become associated with young earth creationism. That means if you criticize evolution, that means you believe the earth is 6,000 years old. How could you be so irrational as to believe that? So in the Western world, what we find is, evolution is not an obstacle for people to come to Krishna consciousness. Criticism of evolution is the obstacle. You get it? That because when we criticize evolution, what they start thinking is, oh, you are like those young earth creationists. And I don't want to join those religious nuts. So I have a talk, don't be a religious nut, be a spiritual fruit. So don't be a religious nut. So the idea is that, now can evolution be an inferred mechanism? See, this worldview threatens Christianity more than Krishna consciousness. Why? Because within the Christian worldview, there is the idea only humans have souls. So this is a little subtle concept, but I'll explain this. See, what Christianity claims is that humans are a different category of being. That all the animals are a different category and humans are a completely different category. So what Darwin said is that evolution will actually teach some Christians some humility. What is the idea? Christianity gives you the ego that you humans are completely special, you are a different category. But you are just an animal. You're an evolved animal. So be humble, don't think you are special. So now, you see, if in our philosophy, are humans special? Well, yes, but that speciality is in the degree of consciousness being evolved. It's not a different category. That animals also have souls, humans also have souls. What differentiates humans is that the consciousness is more evolved. But it is not that, so in that sense, Christianity had to believe that humans are in a different category from all animals. And therefore the idea that humans evolved from animals, that was an attack on, at least many Christians thought, is an attack on the very core of Christianity. But for Hinduism, it's not like that. So the body is just a body and the body is not the soul. Now I'm not saying that evolution is true. But what I'm saying is, even if in future some evidence is found which indisputably says that evolution is true, even if it is found, that does not threaten Krishna consciousness. Why? Because in our philosophy, God is also Kala. Krishna comes as time. And what does that mean? See, if a particular machine is designed, like AI, clearly has some intelligence behind it. But if you work with AI, if a particular user uses AI continuously, AI learns about that user and adapts itself to that user. Now, if AI is adapting to the particular user and the environment in which the user works, that does not prove that there was no designing intelligence. that proves that the designing intelligence was so intelligent that it created self-learning capability within the AI. Isn't it? So for us, if nature can evolve according to the environment and assume different forms, we understand that God acts through nature as Kala. So that does not threaten our concept of God. So it actually shows that God has made nature intelligent enough that it can adapt to the environment. Now, I'm not again saying that evolution is true. I'm saying that even if it is true, it does not threaten our faith in Krishna. Now we may say, but the Bhagavatam describes that the particular Brahma was created and the Devatas were created and there's a particular sequence of creations. Yeah, that is true. But is any of that describing how life came on the earth? It's describing how life came on the higher planets. Now, does that mean that life came on the earth through evolution? No. But my point is again, the Bhagavatam's version and the scientific version, they don't have to be intrinsically contradictory. Just as, say, when we say the planets move according to the theory of planets move or the objects move according to gravity. Now, does gravity threaten our faith in Krishna? No. So, should evolution threaten our faith in Krishna? Well, possibly. Why? Because there's a third level of evolution. I think the first level is inferred mechanism. Well, it is, you could say, the jury is still open. That means it depends on evidence. So, if there is a devotee who is in the field of evolution and who feels that the evidence is strong enough, and that devotee accepts evolution, I don't think it disqualifies the devotee for practicing bhakti. Now, personally, at this stage, whatever I have studied, I think there's a lot of evidence that is lacking. There's a lot of evidence which is, there's some evidence, but there's a lot of evidence that is lacking. And I could go further into that if any of you are interested. But the third is that evolution is as an ideology. As almost like an all-explaining ideology. That means this is the worldview where, because nature came from evolution, therefore there is no place for God. So this is unacceptable for us. And almost all the times, all the times when Prabhupada was presented evolution, he was always presented evolution as an atheistic evolution. That means evolution as an ideology that explains everything and therefore there is no room for God. So if somebody is claiming evolution as an ideology, then definitely we have an issue with that. But there is a three-level explanation of evolution. So evolution as an observed phenomena, evolution as that we have no problem at all. Evolution as a mechanism, it depends on the individual. And evolution as an ideology, definitely not. So that is, if we accept evolution as an ideology, then there's no need for God, there's no place for God. Then what do you mean you are Krishna conscious? If you accept a worldview where there's no place for God, then how can you be Krishna conscious? So when I explained these three levels to this Mataji, she said, this is actually given me a lot of intellectual relief. She said that I accept the first and the second, but I would never accept the third. So whenever we meet, we discuss. She's very intelligent, and we discuss. I have got her involved in scientific research, which devotees are doing now. Devotees are also creating scientific forums for doing researches in various fields. So she's also exploring. So we hope in the next 10-15 years, we as a movement will be able to scientifically make a statement about what is the Krishna conscious position on evolution. Right now, most devotees believe that evolution is wrong and scripture is right. But that is an oversimplified understanding. And it's not that we necessarily have to choose between the two. Certain aspects, definitely, we have to choose. We cannot accept evolution as an all-explaining ideology. But this is the individual aspect. The individual aspect is that each one of us, depending on our particular interest in science, particular emphasis in science, depending on our particular interest in spirituality, depending on our particular emphasis in spirituality, we will have to find out our individual way in which we can bring science and spirituality together in our lives and our hearts. So there is a social or a universal aspect of spirituality, but there's also an individual aspect of spirituality. And this individual aspect is something which we may not have to encounter also. We may not, if we don't have any interest, okay, this is one tool that I use for my daily life. And spirituality is for the nourishment of my bhakti, and that's the calling of my life. And we can move forward that way also. So I'll summarize what I discussed. Because I discussed 3 main points. I talk about science and spirituality, their relationship. I talk about first from a historical perspective. So in the historical perspective, I talk about 2 main things, that phenomena can have multiple explanations. There's the explanation of mechanism, and there is an explanation at the level of the source. So for Newton, he was interested in mechanism, but he also accepted the source. But as science started growing, what happened was, science started saying that God as a creator and God as a controller. So initially, in the age of Newton, there was theism, where God is expressed as both a creator and controller. Then, with Spinoza and others, it came to deism, where the laws of nature explain how the world works, and therefore, there is no need for God as the controller, or there is no place for God as the controller. And then atheism came as that neither is there. So now science became associated with atheism because of the science. When you're studying this mechanism, it has this methodological naturalism, and that is fairly okay. But from methodology, here they came to metaphysical naturalism, and that is a problem. So we also discussed what was predicted by some people was that as science grows, the idea of God will die. But this did not happen. That it's almost, say, America is the engine of science, but still also there's belief in God. So it has not happened like that. So why has it not happened? Then we discussed at a philosophical level. How do we make sense, or how do we reconcile things? So here I talk about how science is different from scientism. Scientism is the idea that science can answer all questions. And we discussed this one concept, that there is the world of science and there is the world of human beings. So they intersect. The intersection is significant. Maybe this is not a fair depiction. We could say there is a significant level of intersection, but there is a significant area of non-intersection also. So that we discussed about pain, there is no painometer. We discussed about love, there is no loveometer. There are many things about human life. That's a reductionism. In science, reductionism can explain things, but it cannot explain people. It cannot explain human behavior. If we were nothing except products of the laws of nature, then all of human behavior should be predictable. But it is not. So, and then also we talk about here, we have the whole quantum world. That the quantum world is, it just makes no sense as per how we conceive the world. So I talked about how originally the empirical and the rational, they were together. In especially Newtonian physics. So basically Newtonian physics brought it together. But then what happened was, rationalism and empiricism started diverging away, and there is no theory of everything that can explain it. So especially if you consider quantum, it just makes no sense. The current mainstream understanding is that we have reality and there are different models which explain different aspects of reality. But there is no one model that explains all of reality. There's no one map that fully explains all the territory. So traveling the territory is always going to be different from understanding the map. So then, science offers various models, but can spirituality also offer a model? And that's where we talked about that if you consider this to be the same concept, science offers one model, spirituality offers another model. Science is the study of matter. Spirituality is the study of what matters, what is really important in my life. And with respect to this, broadly we could say that science works, the way we can broadly reconcile the two is that we can say science deals with the outer world for us. We navigate the outer world through science, and we navigate the inner world till we realize our soul, and we ultimately realize super soul within us through spirituality. And the individual navigation, the individual aspect of science and spirituality, I talked about the two extremes. One is science claims it becomes all explaining and leaves no room for spirituality. The other is, so this we discuss how scientism is wrong, then spirituality becomes all explaining and it leaves no space. I discuss about how if faith healing happens, it can happen, but if they say that therefore there's no need for medicine, or that you should not take medicine, then that would be a problem. So the idea is we can reconcile both. That we use again vidyam cha jastad vedo vayamsa, outer world and inner world. So I discussed two examples. One was about how much to sleep. Now normally sleep is also a tammo guna, so we minimize it. But if a particular medical condition requires a person to sleep more, it's not that you are violating a regulative principle in bhakti by sleeping. Isn't it? And then I discussed about evolution. So can evolution be reconciled? We discussed 3 levels. Evolution as an observed phenomena, we have no problem with that. Evolution as a mechanism, well, the jury is open. If somebody accepts it, that is up to them. But evolution as an ideology, that definitely can't be accepted. So that way, different areas of interaction with science and spirituality can be individually navigated. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Thank you very much for such a wonderful and good explanation. And actually, one more diagram which I had the same is like regarding this domain of science and spirituality. There is a deductive approach, inductive approach, and abductive approach, and spirituality in terms of revelation and rational. We at times encounter students in their initial exam sessions on this part. Can you just throw some light on that?
Okay, excellent. Thank you for mentioning that. See, this is when science seems to, when you can see the main area where science and spirituality conflict now is with respect to origins. That's the main area. And with respect to human nature and everything that is there. But here, especially when it comes to origins, almost every religion has its own narrative about how the origin came about. And then that has to be reconciled individually. But when science goes to origins, how does science study origins? That's very important to understand. See, all science is not the same. In the sense that science also uses different methods. So broadly, science has 3 methods. One is the deductive method. Deductive means it's largely maths based. So 4 plus 9 will always be 30. There is no exception to that. Now that is deductive, this is the truth, and we deduce it from here. Most of science works on inductive reasoning. So inductive reasoning means what? We observe something, we make experiments, and then we evaluate it. So for example, when Newton saw the apple falling, he experimented, okay, will a stone object fall? Will a metal fall? Will it fall in Paris? Will it fall in Melbourne? Will it fall in New York? So the idea is that, maybe not New York. New York was not there at the time of Newton. So, okay. But whether it will fall in different parts of the world. So is it repeatable? So if you can repeat it up to n times, then n plus 1, we can say it will happen. So most of the successes of science have come in the domain of inductive reasoning. Inductive way of approaching has led to lots of successes for science. So, however, induction requires repeated experimentation. And induction is not possible with respect to historical events. Isn't it? That when life came or the universe came, however it came, we cannot tell the universe, please come back again and start so I can observe you. We can't replicate it. So here, science uses a third method called abductive reasoning. Now, abductive reasoning is what? That this has got nothing to do with abduction. It's a different word. Abductive means what? It is like a mystery novel. So if we know, oh, this person was murdered. This person was murdered, the lucidity indicate that this person was murdered between 3 to 5 p.m. And 6 p.m., 3 to 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. somebody came to clean the house or wake that person up and they found him dead. 9 p.m. at night, the person came to give him his food and water and then left. Night he was sleeping alone. So now you say, okay, is there a camera over here? Who all came into the house? We can try to infer based on that. Now we may say, okay, between this period, there's only 2 people who came to this house. One was a 5-year-old child and the other was a 90-year-old grandmother. And neither of them, if they was killed with this knife, neither of them is strong enough to have put the knife in his body. So then there's a butler in the home. Maybe the butler killed. Okay, so now this is an inference to the best explanation. This is never as reliable as inductive logic. So what happens over here, that when we make the inference, this is also a method in science, it's called IBM. Inference to the best explanation. Now when we use inference to the best explanation, when we say this is the best explanation, there are 3 limitations with it. The first limitation is, maybe, is there a better inference possible? With my understanding, I came up with this is the best inference. But maybe there might be a better inference. Second is, did I gather all the evidence? Maybe I overlooked some evidence. Maybe there is somebody, 4th person existing in a house which I did not know about. Living in the house I didn't know about. And the third is, there might be future evidence that may come to light. So maybe afterwards when the house is to be demolished, because they want to make a new house over there, then they find, okay, there's a whole trapdoor and a tunnel under the house, under the bed of the person. And somebody came in from there. So the thing is that inference to best explanation is never as reliable as the product of scientific theories that have come from inductive reasoning. Okay? So now, for example, laws of motion, they have come from inductive reasoning. But evolution, it has come from abductive reasoning. Isn't it? Say, whether 5,000 years ago or 1 million years ago or 8 million years ago, whatever. How much do we know about how life was at that time? So what we know itself is limited. And then from that, how well we infer how things came about. That itself is limited. So, one of the biggest problems with using archaeology, 2 main problems, archaeology, using archaeology to try to get a picture of ancient life, is that when people die, at that time, if they're buried in the topsoil, the burial is not very deep, then what happens? The soil keeps getting eroded. If it's close to a river especially. And rivers also change their paths. So even archaeologists acknowledge that there could be many fossil remains that are at the bottom of the ocean. Because of sedimentation, they got swept away. And the second big problem with archaeology is, in the Vedic tradition, bodies are burnt. So there could have been an entire civilization which existed and there would be no archaeological record of it. Because if people are burnt, the bodies are burnt, then there's no fossil remaining of it. Isn't it? So the point is that archaeology, it gives us a very limited picture of the ancient world. So it's not that it is false, but it's a very limited. And therefore, when we make an inference to the best explanation, this is always going to be very tentative. That's why even when we say that I don't accept evolution, that does not necessarily mean I reject science. I am questioning one particular theory within science. And even if scientists may say, oh, evolution, there's a lot of evidence for evolution. But still, evolution is never as strongly rooted as, say, Newton's laws of motion. Or the theories that have come from inductive reasoning. That's why questioning evolution does not make us anti-science. That's why I started by saying all science is not having the same level of credibility. So that's why in the West there was a lot of, when this COVID vaccine was made, there's a lot of opposition to vaccines. Because people felt that it's an experimental vaccine almost. They made it very fast, and how much do you test it? So those who oppose the vaccine, they call it anti-vax. You are like anti-vax people. I said, no, I am not against vaccines. I am against this COVID vaccine. Because it's not been adequately tested. So all vaccines are not of the same level of research and same level of safety. So like that, all theories in science are not at the same level of evidentiary strength. They don't have the same level of strong evidence. So especially theories with regard to the origin of human life, origin of the universe, they are highly inferential. And they almost entirely they come from abductive reasoning. And that's why we can be very confident in our acceptance of science and still our skepticism of these theories of origin. Okay? Is that clear? Do you have anything more? Okay, there's some question here. I got one. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thank you so much for the wonderful class. Like before this class, I was just accepting, okay, this is science and this is spirituality. Maybe we can't merge that both two. Because many of times in the class we will, like, when we heard, like a small example which is coming in my mind, the juice in the fruits comes from the moonlight. So that time, moonlight. So that time it was like little bit, because we never read such kind of things in our like books and all these things. So it's very hard to digest that. But we know from this class also, okay, we have science has some limitations, own limited or something like that. So there can be so many examples in which like it seems science and spirituality contradicts. So how do we, in that situation, how do we convince ourselves, or what should be our approach towards that?
Okay. So, if there are some examples where science and spirituality seem to contradict each other. So, for example, the moonlight nourishes the fruit's juiciness. Pushnami chaushami sarva somo bhutva rasatmaka. That's the 15th chapter verse. So, how do we explain this? Well, first of all, that even during Krishna's time, farming was happening. It is not that farmers would plant fruits and let the moon nourish it. So, the point is that, is this replacing the natural explanation? The normal natural explanation. Like I said, an event can have multiple explanations. So there is no evidence in the historical record that the normal means of nourishing vegetation, nourishing plants, nourishing crops, that was neglected in the name of this. That's the first point. So that means here spirituality is not infringing on the domain of science and saying that the scientific explanation is natural explanation, that it's invalid. That there are many metaphors in the Bhagavatam itself, including Krishna's teachings, where it talks about how we need to provide water to, like in the modern Krishna's teachings, you can say in the Chaitanya Charan, it is there that if you have a seed, then you have to bhakti lata bij, you have to water it. He doesn't say that wait for the moonlight to come. Yeah. So the point is that is not contradicting the natural explanation. Now, now this is also not a, this is an additional explanation. Is Krishna saying, so now exactly how does it work? So see, there is, with respect to nature, with respect to gardening, with respect to anything that involves working with nature, with even farming, there is a craft aspect of it and there is an art aspect of it. What do I mean by this craft and art aspect? That you could, if somebody is having an orchard of, say, apples, then you can nourish the entire field where the orchard is there with the same kind of water, the same kind of fertilizers, you have the same kind of sunlight. Everything is the same. But still, each apple is not exactly the same. Isn't it? Some apples are softer, some apples are harder, some apples are more juicy. Now we could say certain kinds of apples are sweeter, some kind of are less sweet, that is true. But within that, each apple is individual. It's not that every apple, two roses may be very similar, but each rose has its variation. So now, why is it that some apples are softer and more juicy? Like when we buy mangoes, we all would like to have juicy mangoes. But we may buy the same shop, same rack, but one mango might be juicier and another might not be juicy. And then, we give another mango and another person's mango is juicier. Maybe I should take that mango, I should give this one to it. We feel like that. So there is the craft aspect, but there is, by art aspect means that there is something which is not a craft. So when we talk about the juiciness of apples, that is something which is an additional explanation. The principle that Krishna is talking about over there is, so the specific is, okay, I become the moon and sustain and provide juice. But the principle over there is that when we exist in the world, what we need for the world, what we need for our existence is provided by factors beyond us. That is the emphatic point over there. Like say, there are different models of the body. Krishna in the next verse says, Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Deham Ashrita Pranapana Pachasam Pranapana Mayukta Pachamyanam Chaturvidham. So he said, I am the digestive fire. Now according to allopathy, there is no such thing as a digestive fire. Whereas within Ayurveda, Jatragni is like the fundamental thing. If your Jatragni is strong, your whole body will be good. Jatragni is weak, nothing will work. Everything else will fall apart. Now these are two different models of the body. And models of how the body works. Now there are some things which are similar. Ayurveda also accepts there is a heart, there is an intestine, the organs are the same. But the Ayurveda focuses more on Kapha Vata Pitta. The allopathy focuses more on biochemicals and how we can be balancing things. So now these are, like I said, the reality can have different models. So I would say that Krishna, when he is explaining things at that particular time, the scripture is also spoken at a particular time. So he is explaining how to see God within the model of reality that was present at that time. So the point is not the model of reality, whether that model of reality is accurate or not, or what the model of reality is. The point is that there is a way to see God's hand within how we are being sustained. That's how the section starts with 15.11-12 is Vimudhananu Pashyanti Jnana Chakshusha. With the eyes of knowledge we can see. With the eyes of knowledge we can see the soul, the spiritual side, and we can see God, both. So that is the emphasis over there. That's why whenever we study scripture, in scripture there are two things. There is the point being studied and there is the point of the point. Point of the point means why is the point being made? So the point is important, but the point of the point is more important. Isn't it? That what is being said and why is it being said? So that's why Krishna may speak some things in scripture generally. There are certain things which are descriptive and certain things which are prescriptive. What do I mean by descriptive and prescriptive? That descriptive means Krishna is describing how things were at that time. So, for example, Chaitanya Charan described that Haridas Thakur was not allowed into Jagannath temple because he is born in a Muslim family. So now that is describing. Is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prescribing that nobody should be allowed into, if somebody is from non-Hindu family, they should not be allowed into temples? No, that's not. That's a descriptive. So in scripture, there are many things that are descriptive. So Baldev Vyabhusha says in Vedanta Sutra that the scriptural statements that are imperative. Imperative means do this. They are prescriptive statements. So for example, Nainam Chinnandi Shastrani Nanam Dahati Pavaka. The soul can never be cut, the soul can never be burned. That is a descriptive statement. Now, Karmanneva Adhikaraste Mafaleshu Kadachina. Or Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. That is a prescriptive statement. So when descriptive statements come, they will come naturally based on that particular context. So Krishna tells Arjuna to fight a war. Does that mean that all of us have to fight wars? There was one Indian, I was, 2017-18 it was, I was catching a flight and I saw one person reading a newspaper. Now you hardly see anyone reading newspapers physically. But he saw that. There was some person who had died and he said India's greatest mistake after independence was that it did not follow the Bhagavad Gita. I said, wow, that's interesting. Then I googled and found out. And this person said that if India had been following Bhagavad Gita, as soon as India was partitioned, India would have attacked Pakistan and conquered all that territory. And that was following the Bhagavad Gita. So following the Bhagavad Gita is fight. Krishna tells you to fight. Now, fighting is a point in the Gita. But what is the point of the point? The point of the point is to harmonize with the will of God. Isn't it? That's why at the end of the Gita, when Arjuna said, Nashto moha smriti labdha, tat prasadan mayachyuta, sitosmi gata sandeha, yudhyasva karani, he doesn't say, karishye vachanam tava, he says. I will do your will. Now that will at that time happens to be fighting. So the point is often contextual. The point of the point is universal. So now if we want to explore, I know a couple of devotees who are doing some research in this field, that what are the factors that determine, like when will you get a bountiful harvest? There are many factors which are beyond what our simple mechanical worldview comes in. So like we say, if a cow is loud, she'll give more milk. Now, is that something which you can mathematically demonstrate? Well, it is an experience. But how do you know? How can you measure how much love a cow was given and how much milk it gave? You cannot really measure love, isn't it? So there are certain things which make sense, but they may not be scientifically measurable. So I would say there are certain things in scripture which come from the worldview at that time, the model of reality prevalent at that time. Now, is the model of reality prevalent at that time prescriptive for us? Not necessarily. The point is, through whatever model of reality you have, you try to see the hand of God. So now, if we look at in our model of reality, there might be pulsars and quasars and black holes. And still, if you see some of the telescopes and the pictures that they get from the laboratories, recently there was a Hudson particle lab. They had a picture of the universe. It's such a stupendously magnificent picture of the universe that it just fills you with awe and wonder. Such an amazingly complex and coordinated universe. It points to a higher intelligence. The point is that whichever model of reality we have, we don't necessarily have to reject that and accept some other model of reality. But through the model of reality, see the pointers towards God. Like Ayurveda and allopathy offer different models of reality. If we have to be Krishna conscious, do we have to necessarily follow Ayurveda? Not necessarily. We can follow allopathy, but we can still see pointers towards God. Okay. Yes. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain that how that metaphysical naturalism leads to non-theism?
How metaphysical naturalism leads to non-theism. See, metaphysical naturalism holds that natural reality is all that exists. And therefore, now God is not a natural reality. Natural means God is not a material reality. Whichever tradition we go to, most spiritual traditions, most theistic traditions accept that God is a non-material being. And therefore, if reality is only natural, then there is no place left for a non-natural being. And in that sense, it at the very least leads to non-theism. It actually, methodological naturalism normally leads to non-theism. Metaphysical naturalism will lead to atheism. So, these particular worldviews, whether they are operational or ontological means they are more of a nature of reality, they will have some implications. Does that answer your question? So if someone is not much bothered about science or evolution and just using technology as they are required, what effect will come after his rejection or acceptance of science to his spirituality? I think that's very individual. You can't really say for sure what will happen. Ultimately, Krishna doesn't say that Antakale you have to reject evolution and come. Ultimately, Krishna sees how much is the love of our heart. So I would say that if it is not affecting a person's connection with Krishna, commitment to Krishna, absorption in Krishna, then it should not have much effect. Yes, please. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, a wonderful class. So, if you see evolution and all, there is a stark difference in how science says because 65 million years ago this asteroid came and then destroyed dinosaurs, and that is the timeline of this thing, mainstream and science. And we believe our Chaturyugas and how to.
Yeah, I agree with you that. See, once you talk about reconciling, specifics will require a lot more careful research to reconcile. And whether all the specific details are reconcilable, that's open to question. I doubt whether all the specific details can be reconciled. But my point is that it is not that the two are intrinsically irreconcilable. Like I said that now with specific dinosaurs, we do have 5 fossils to indicate the existence of dinosaurs. Now when Prabhupada asked about dinosaurs, Prabhupada said dinosaur, we are agasaur. So now there is one point is dinosaurs existed. Now, does it necessarily mean that dinosaurs ruled the planet and humans couldn't exist at that particular time? It could be dinosaurs were in a different continent or a different part of the world. Humans were in a different part of the world. And as again, the point is that we may say that we do not have fossils of humans when dinosaurs were there. It's possible, but that's also because if Vedic civilization was there, then that means there would be no burial, there would be cremation. So there would be no fossils of that. So it's possible that there could be an age of dinosaurs, but that does not necessarily mean dinosaurs meant there are no human beings. So I think specifics will require much more careful research. If somebody has some interest in that field, because see, the interaction of Hinduism with science, Christianity has been having an interaction with science for at least 4 or 5 centuries now. Mm-hmm. Now, Hinduism, as an intellectual level, it is largely post-independence. But Hinduism's interaction with science, or with, like, not even science, you could say the mainstream body of intellectual knowledge, it has been more about defending specific criticisms of Hinduism rather than presenting the Hindu worldview. That means, say, the caste system, is it intrinsic to Hinduism? Or is it something which was a later accretion and deviation? Or deity worship that was criticized by Christianity more than science. But so Hinduism is focused on a more on individual practices or individual social forms or specific social forms. So the broader dialogue between Hinduism and science, that has not happened that much. So I think intellectuals will have to, Hindu intellectuals, Vedic intellectuals, there's a lot of scope for serious research in that area. And that's why I said there's a whole individual scope of how do we find out our particular reconciliation. Okay, last two questions. Yeah.
Prabhuji, we are saying ki, we have 8.4 million species. So, but science also says that same. But they are
I don't think they use the same number.
number is not same, but they are
Multiple species, yeah.
multiple species. But probably if they have existed before also and will exist also, then where's the question of extinction, like which science
See,
talked about?
extinction, if we understand that the bodies are given to souls according to their natures, according to the nature of their desires specifically, then the bodies are also the ways by which the soul interacts with particular environments. And if the environment changes, particular bodies may become unsuitable. Isn't it? Say there can be a global cloth manufacturing company which makes, say, winter clothes, which makes sweaters. But if it has a production unit in a country and the season is summer, it may no longer manufacture or market woolen products because they're not needed at that particular time. Does that mean that woolen products have become extinct? It can seem like that. So in the Vedic worldview, the life forms exist everywhere. And in particular places, if the environment changes and particular environment is no longer suitable for particular bodies, the bodies are like clothes. So then it can appear that they have become extinct. So when we say the 8.4 million species, there is no categorical statement that all the 8.4 million species have to be there on each planet, or that all of them have to be there on each planet at all times. So it's possible that some may not be present at some times. Okay. Yes, last question.
Hare Krishna. I have a question regarding free will. So, in the context, like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he knows the past, present, and future of every soul.
Because this is different from our topic today.
Yeah, this little related.
Okay, go ahead.
Also, in the same context, another place it is said like all our actions are mostly governed by gunas, or the modes of nature.
Okay.
So, in that context, isn't every action or behavior, as you said, it is unpredictable, but isn't, if future can be deduced, isn't that it's predictable actually? So, where does free will exactly exist?
Okay. According to your theory, then I don't have the free will to answer this question. So the thing is that free will is a big paradox. See, if somebody says, I have no free will, so the rejection of free will requires to have free will to reject free will. So it's a bit problematic. I mean, let's go into a little bit more philosophical technicality. That let's see what Krishna says about the modes. That particular verse 327 is often oversimplified in its understanding. What Krishna says is that Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma karta ahamiti manyate. Krishna says material nature is doing things. The soul who has too much ahankar, arrogance, that thinks I am the doer. So this verse might seem to say that we are not the doers at all. But then the whole purpose of the Bhagavad Gita was to get Arjuna to do something. Isn't it? At the end of the Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, deliberate and now do as you desire. Vimrishshanta dasheshena yathechasi tatha kuru. Kuru is now you do as you desire. And then, that is 1863, 10 years later, 1873, Arjuna says that, Karishe vachanam tava. I will do your will. So the Gita is saying, we are not the doers, that is what it was saying. Then why is it telling Arjuna, now do you as you desire? So the reconciliation comes in 18.16, where Krishna says, Tatraivam sati kartaram atmanam kevalam tuya pashyatya akruta buddhitvan nasa pashyati durmati. Krishna says, therefore, Tatraivam sati kartaram, this doer, atmanam kevalam tuya. When somebody thinks, I am the sole doer, that is pashyatya akruta buddhitvan nasa pashyati durmati. Such a person is uninformed or incompletely informed in their intelligence. So the illusion is not to think that we are the doers. The illusion is to think that I am the sole doer. So we certainly play a part because we desire, we seek. And then material nature is the machine that executes. So the Gita doesn't say that everything is done by the modes. The desiring is done by the soul. And the scope for free will within the three guna theory is that we can choose the guna we will be influenced by. So it's like a video game. If you're playing a video game, you come to a crossroad. You can go this way, you can go this way, you can go this way. So now, there are three options for you. You have to choose one among them. But still, you choose one. So we could say that the gunas are like different needs. And we choose. So at each moment, so right now you're sitting. Now you're sitting and hearing, you could just lie back and relax. And very gracefully. From Sattva Guna, you can slide into Tamo Guna. Now, if you sit carefully, sit attentively. It's conditioned to more Sattva Guna. If you're sleeping, you can stand up and will create some Raja Guna. The point is, we can choose among the gunas. And each choice might be a micro choice. But each micro choice over a period of time can make a mega change. If continuously, every day we wake up in the morning, we are choosing Sattva Guna every day. So what will happen is, gradually we will develop Sattvic composition. So like that, the Gita perspective of modes does not say that we have no freedom. Definitely leaves scope for freedom. Now, if somebody is very much in Tamo Guna, then for them to choose Sattva Guna might be difficult. But they may well choose Raja Guna, they will choose some frequency. So the range of options might be lesser or more for us, but still we always have choice. Now with respect to Krishna's knowing the future, there are three ways of understanding it. First is that Krishna's knowledge of the future is like our knowledge of the past. It is information without intervention. That I know that I wanted to wake up at 4 o'clock, but I woke up at 4:50. I know that today, but I can't change that. It's information without intervention. So Krishna also knows, but Krishna does not change it. He can, but he does not change it. That's one level of understanding. The second level of understanding is that Krishna's knowledge of the future is more the knowledge of the future options and the consequences of those options. Not necessarily the knowledge of the specific choices that we make. It's like, say, Google has the whole territory mapped out. So now, if I take this turn, I'll go over here. If I take that turn, I'll go over here. So Google has the whole territory mapped out. And even if we take a wrong turn, Google can still get us back on the right track. Now Google may tell us to make a vertical choice, but Google is not controlling the choice we make. So if you see the overall context of that chapter, the point Krishna is making is Vedaham Samatitani, the verses before that, after that, Vedaham Prakasha Sarvasya Yogamaya Samavata, those verses come, Ichchadvesha Samuttena. What the context is there is that while we are in illusion, Krishna is not in illusion. And Krishna can therefore get us out of illusion. Therefore, if we Yesham Pantagatam Papam Jananam Punya Karmana Vedvandva Moho Nirmukta Bhajante Mam Drudavrita. So we may be lost, but we are never lost to Krishna. And Krishna can get us back. So when Krishna says, I know the future, it is more to assure that whatever problems you may face in the future, I will help you deal with them. So it is not to say that the future is all preordained and you have no free will. Again, there's a point and there's a point of the point. So the point, if you see, of the Bhagavad Gita is to assure Arjuna that it's not just I am here to guide you today, but tomorrow I won't be there. No, I will always be there with you. It is to assure Arjuna of that. Third point is that even if we say Krishna knows the future, the essence of life is not knowing but loving. If you consider the Leela that happens in the spiritual world, Krishna knows what Leela is going to happen. Krishna knows that Mother Yashoda will try to tie me and I'll run away and I'll run and finally she'll catch me. But through it all, Krishna experiences Yashoda Mai's love. Yashoda Mai expresses her, Krishna expresses her love. And sometimes somebody loves a movie very much. Then they may, especially particular scenes in the movie, they may watch those scenes again and again. They know exactly which dialogue who is going to speak. But there, the point of watching it is not knowing. The point is experiencing. So like that, rasa is not about jnana. Rasa is about anubhav. So that means that even if Krishna knows, say for example, we are going to go back to God only after 10 lifetimes. Assume. Still, if we choose to love Krishna, our life will be happier for those 10 lifetimes. And if we choose not to love Krishna, then we will stay away from happiness to that degree. Okay? So, let's continue some other time. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Gaur Premanand.